Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for watching. Today I have a really special guest with me. Her name is Xavier.
Tommy was my firstborn child, so he was very special. Him being born completely changed the course of my life, and my whole life revolved around him. And so he was very special to me, being my first child, and he just was a light. Like, he always had a smile on his face. At a young age, he started having this goofy mentality where he would, just be silly all the time and play jokes, and he kept that growing up through his teenage years. When he was 3 years old, we lost his dad in a car accident, and it was hard for me to understand and go through that type of loss, but for a 3-year-old, I mean, it's just impossible to try to help them understand how their dad's never coming back,
Exactly.
We started noticing more consistency of him starting to isolate himself. He was diagnosed with ADHD and then later diagnosed with anxiety and depression. But, everyone that knew him, and even the teachers, when he had trouble in school, they're like, he is so sweet and he is just a kid that we adore and love, but it's like he just wanted to push against, what was expected of him in a way. And we realized that a lot of that had to come with the fact that he was struggling internally with some things that he couldn't voice. All the times when he was going through that, the pain that he would always go back to was the loss of his dad, the feeling of abandonment. And that was just very traumatizing to him, even as a 3-year-old, not understanding it and dealing with it. Okay. So we know that was pretty much what the cause and what continued to bother him as he grew up into these adulthood years. He graduated high school a year late, and we found out that his girlfriend, his on and off again girlfriend, was pregnant. He didn't know if he was ready to be a father, but he didn't think it was right to not have the baby either. Then he had just graduated high school, so he had the pressure of having to think about going to college and the pressure of trying to find a job and just a lot of change. And throughout his years, he always did not do well with change. The beginning of August, we had a big graduation party for him to celebrate his graduation. Okay. Had over 100 friends and family there that were just loving on them and so proud of him for this accomplishment. He said to me that day, he said, "Mom, I'm really struggling and I think I need to go back to the doctor." I said, "Okay, let's get you into the doctor right away. I'll call first thing Monday morning." I did, took him to the doctor. They prescribed him some depression medication. About a week later, asked me to go out to lunch, and we sat and had lunch together, and he was talking about the future, let me know that his girlfriend was moving in with him. They were going to keep the baby, that everything was going to be great. Okay. He was looking forward to it. A week later, I got a phone call while I was at work, and him and his girlfriend had had a fight, and he wasn't answering his phone. And so I decided to go check on him, and I walked in on my worst nightmare because my son had gotten to the point where he felt like life wasn't living and had taken his life.
Talking about that, it makes me realize that people every day, they think it's not okay to not be okay. And people have to realize that life is very, very difficult. Things are always going to come at you in every single direction. It's okay to have, a cry for help. Being by yourself or, being isolated and doing those things to yourself can really cause a lot of pain in someone's life. And obviously Tommy was not crying out for help in the way he should be. Is there anything that you want to express on the matter of it's okay not to be okay sometimes?
Yeah, well, a couple things that I learned, and one thing that I like to talk about is the fact that when we went to the doctors throughout his entire life, when he was diagnosed with depression, not once did anybody tell us that that's the, 80% of people that die by suicide had a diagnosis of depression at one point in time in their life. So it's a high probability when somebody gets diagnosed for depression that there is a chance that they might, get to that point. Yeah. I did everything everybody told me to do, but I didn't know to look at it myself, to study it and educate myself to understand what to look for and what to do. It is okay not to be okay, and it's okay to have, when you see somebody that's struggling and going through all these changes, to sit down and ask them, how are you feeling? Really, are you feeling? Have you had any thoughts of life not being worth living when you're going through all these changes and these things? I never knew to even ask that question. And, you know, I've learned that if you ask that question, people will most likely tell you whether they are or not. It's knowing that it's okay to talk about it. It's knowing that it's okay to go to somebody and share what you're feeling and what you're thinking, and get the support and help that you need in that moment. Because on the flip side, you know, we have to live our entire life without him here, and our lives will never be the same. Our lives are forever changed.
Going back to that last question, I know that bringing up suicide or even talking about it it's such a taboo topic. It's such a risque topic. When you bring it up to someone, a lot of people think it's embarrassing to talk about, or embarrassing to have those feelings, saying, oh, I'm such a weak person that I'm having, you know, these thoughts go through my head and I don't want to admit it to someone. Just because you have a thought process or, you know, those thoughts going through your head, it doesn't make you a weak person. It doesn't make you, you know, any lesser than anybody else. And, you know, people have to realize that every human being is supposed to be here. Every human being is meant to do something in this world. And it's very hard to figure out what you're meant to do. Tommy had it very, very hard, but he had a lot of people supporting him. Obviously, as you can see. Is there anything, you know, you want to speak about on the fact that, you know, it's okay to talk about suicide?
Right, well, not only it's okay to talk about, but we have to start talking about it more. It's a necessity. So, you know, 1 in 5 people live with a mental illness. That statistic, it doesn't mean that you're weak. It just means that it affects a lot of people, and that we don't have to be ashamed or embarrassed or feel that we're weak because we're dealing with that. But it's important that we talk about it, because the statistics are astounding. You know, I mean, in our county alone, there's 41 lives a year that are lost to suicide. The research says that for every 1 suicide death, there's 115 people directly affected. That's a lot of people just in our community. Then you take it out to the United States, there's 1 million suicide attempts a year. This is not something that we can't not talk about.
Exactly.
We absolutely have to talk about it.
When you're going through something as heartaching as is Tommy's situation and whatnot, definitely your thought process is not what it should be, and mental health takes a, you know, huge toll on you. And what do you think Tommy's mental health state was at the time in 2014?
Well, you know, that's one of the things that I had to find out for myself. What I did is I started facilitating teen support groups, and the teens there, I just asked them, will you help me understand those who had attempted before? What it felt for you like in that moment when you wanted to end your life, so that I can try to understand what my son was feeling. What they explained to me is when you get in that moment, it is just an immense brain pain, where your brain is so much in pain because of something that happened or a situation that happened, that you cannot think of the past and all the people that have been there for you and all the good things that have happened. You can't think of the future and all the things you get to look forward to and what you might have in your life in the future. You don't really think about your loved ones, and if you do, you're thinking that they're going to be better off without you, because this pain is so unbearable that you think that you're a burden to them. They just want that pain to end, and their brain basically tells them that the only way to end that pain is to end their life. When they explained it to me that way, it helps me understand that he wasn't thinking of us. He wasn't thinking of his daughter. He was thinking of the pain and needing that pain to end. And it's heartbreaking, because you know, had he gotten through that pain, we would have been there. You know, we would have been there. But in that moment, he was alone. His brain was telling him that was the only option, and he acted on it.
You see a person whose personality has changed so much, so rapidly, so quickly, and they're isolating themselves so much. And, you know, I've come into contact with people who, you know, they're one way, and then they completely change who they are, and it makes me wonder, hey, like, what is this person going through? What is going on inside their head? And it makes me want to, you know, ask questions and make sure they're okay and be there for them. And sometimes, like you said, it's very hard to, you know, ask these deep questions to someone. Sometimes talking to a complete stranger is the best, therapy in the world. And I know that personally you've started many things in Tommy's name, and can you explain kind of like what you've started and how you're keeping Tommy's name alive?
Well, we started by creating a foundation in his honor, and then have held a couple events. So we do an annual Ride to Fight Suicide, and then we also do an annual walk and run in his honor. We do use that as an opportunity to educate people, provide resources, because that's another thing is, when I was going through this all with Tommy, I had no idea the great resources that we have in our community. We have parent support groups, we have emotional support groups, we have all sorts of things in our community that people are not even aware of. I wasn't aware of, and I needed that support. I speak anywhere anybody invites me, and I share Tommy's story, and I share our story of how we've taken this tragedy and trying to turn it into something positive and keep his memory and honor going forward, because much like people don't realize, but that one act didn't define him and the person that he was. He was a terrific person, a loving person. He always had a smile on his face, even though he was hurting on the inside. This can happen to anybody, and this happens to people that on the outside they appear like they're okay, but on the inside they're really not. And we need to be willing to ask those questions. We need to be willing to look for those signs and know what to do when we see them.
If anyone watching this video right now is, having any thoughts of self-harm or anything of that nature, reach out and make your voice heard. Reach out to someone in the community, or a friend or a parent, or like I said, a complete stranger. Getting that help will, it'll benefit you in the end. One of the last questions I wanted to ask is, everyone is I feel like in our society, once someone is gone, that person means so much more. And we have to realize that, in reality, it's so much more when they're here, because you get to know that person on, a personal level, and you get to experience that person in your life. We have to realize that every human being is supposed to be here. So can you, just go a little bit on that?
Yeah, well, the other thing is that, society has made this culture where we want people to be like we want them to be. And we have to start accepting people for who they are and where they are, and just love them. We want a society that loves people, accepts people, because we're all unique. We're all made for a purpose, and we need to believe that. And we need to accept people and love people where they're at. You're right, love people for who they are and where they are. Don't try to make them something that they're not, because they are who they are for their purpose, not our purpose. And we need to understand and realize that. Being willing to stop and really look at somebody in the eyes and say, no, really, how are you doing? Exactly. Are you okay? Because we've just gotten, into this idea that we have to be okay all the time, and we have to act like we're okay all the time. In reality, we're not. Hearing
Tommy's story and talking to his mother, it was an amazing experience, because, you don't ever think something like this is ever going to happen to you. So when it does, it's, it changes your life forever. The thing that has stuck with me is that even through this pain that I've had with my son and losing my son, there's a purpose behind it, and we have to believe that. And I don't want to live my life without my son, and I would do anything to have him back. But I also, refuse to be silent about his story and his situation, because I think that people can learn from it. Talking about mental health, talking about suicide, it's a very real thing that happens in our world, and it's a very real thing that happens every single day. And just educating people on this is, it's a big deal. Doing what you do, it's so inspiring. And, thank you for, taking the time to come, talk with me, and, my little YouTube channel and whatnot. So you're a very inspiring person, and, thank you very much, seriously. Thank you. Yeah. I appreciate it.